Last week, Mickey Loomis had a brief interview at the 2024 NFL owners meeting. We're going to talk about a couple little clips from that interview. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. Last week was the 2024 NFL owners meeting in Orlando. And for a couple of days, it's more than just the 32 NFL owners. You'll see front office executives, GMs, coaches, and at some point they all will have a type of Q&A, short form type press conference uh, with members of the media. Mickey Loomis, Saints general manager, and Dennis Allen, the head coach, both at various times during the week, um, did it. And there's some clips out there from the media from those interviews. And today I'm going to show a clip of actually two clips from Mickey Loomis's interview last week. You can find the whole thing. I think it's about 8 or 9, 10 minutes long, somewhere in there. But there's kind of two specific areas that I wanted to have you take a look at, and then we'll talk about it after.
Kind of the idea this offseason that and you mentioned this at the comment, just are you guys really going through that process of trying to get a little bit of a cleaner cap and
absolutely.
All these moves kind of telling the same story?
I think we're in that mode right now. We've got to, recover from some of the things that happened with COVID and the contracts that we did in the past. And so not as active in free agency maybe as you'd like to be at times. And look, I think we're probably going to be in that mode for another year or so.
That's kind of the realistic timetables, maybe this year and next year, and then you're kind of where you want to be.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah. Again, that part of that depends upon how we perform. How players perform, how our team performs, what the cap is. There's a lot of variables that go with that. So yeah, we got to get our plan back on pace, and it was knocked off pace by COVID and the reduction in the cap and all the things that came with it.
So you guys used to approach the off season with wants and needs.
Yeah.
Where are you in that process?
Yeah, we're in the middle of it. Yeah, we got the must wants and needs, and we've got some of it taken care of, and there's still free agency still going on. We have an opportunity during this draft to add some players, and then there's always the trade route as well. So we'll leave no stone unturned.
So in the third question, the follow-up to the first two is one, I wish they would have pushed a little further, because basically for the longest time, Loomis and the front office and the Saints were telling us that player movement, roster creation, letting guys walk in free agency, bringing in free agents onto the roster, all these moves were strictly football moves, where the contract, the money, everything didn't play a part. And when you go back to the first two questions, he specifically talks about recovery from the lockdown in 2020, the drop, the NFL's league-wide revenue, which in 2021 was a major reason that the cap was lower. Because the cap was lower, the Saints, who always kind of operated under the assumption that the cap would increase every year because NFL revenue increases every year, so therefore we'll still be fine with that all-in approach they started around 2017, trying to get that second Super Bowl, which again, for the record, was the right call. So that caused the Saints a huge problem. The two things he didn't talk about that I feel he should have was Drew Brees also retiring in 2020, at the end of 2020, and all his remaining dead money became due. I don't know if he had any guaranteed money still left on the contract at that point. So this may have been all money he'd already received that they were just, doing what dead money is, borrowing future cap space to uh, be able to be cap compliant in the current year. So I'm not really sure how it fell out, but I know there was quite a bit of dead money that just, and they knew that was coming. They were prepared for that. What they weren't prepared for was the fact that the cap was going to be lower because of what happened in 2020. The other thing is, subsequent to that, there's some very bad contracts that the Saints gave out to players, and bad for different reasons. So I'm just going to kind of lump them together for the moment and not really start breaking down kind of what happened, but they fall under all categories. Overpaying for veteran players that you were expecting to get more and more years out of, not really coming to fruition. Just bringing in free agents at market or above market rates, and again, not getting the value from the player out the contract, being, for the most part, not very good in the NFL draft over recent seasons. So what happens there is you come up with younger players who are saving you money because they're on their rookie deals, but they're not really providing a whole lot to help you win football games. And in some cases, the Saints were so worried about having to replace a rookie who, I'm going to use Cesar Ruiz as an example. He got an extension last year, or a new deal. I'm not sure which one it was, but either way, it was around 4 years, $40 million. So roughly 10 million average per year, kind of the going rate for right guards in the NFL, the market value. It's kind of the Saints' explanation for doing it. So they didn't have to worry about getting caught at yet another position of having to keep continually trying to replace. Problem is, at no point in his career had he shown his value on the field to be what they're calling the market value for right guards, basically, in the NFL. So if he turns into that, and the jury's still out, although I think most people think, well, last year he was a little better than he was his previous years, but the bar was kind of set so low that it is what it is. So situations like that, the veteran really, really has made a mess of everything. And the whole time the Saints were trying to convince themselves, I think, and trying desperately to convince us that that wasn't going on. This team was just on the verge. They're going to win the division, make that playoff run, get to the Super Bowl, all in, all in, all in. Nah, that wasn't the reality. The reason why I bring all this up is because I almost feel like listening to his response to those three questions about roughly the follow-up. I believe Nick Underhill asked the first two questions, talking about what we have been talking about, or I've been talking about on these episodes, is a reset. It's trying to, hey, we need to trying to get all this under control, get the roster straightened out, get back to bringing in good football players that we can afford in situations that we can afford, while getting that dead money off the books for future years, so we can go back to what we were doing when we tried to make the last Super Bowl push, which is not let the money affect the football decisions. Let's go make, and they must be the correct football decisions, but let's go make the correct football decisions while we can. We'll worry about the cap later because we have a window, we have a shot. That window basically closed at the end of 2020. But the good news is, even though it's 4 years later, what I'm inferring from his answers in these first two questions, and a little bit on the third question that I wish there had been a better follow up from the media on, is they're finally recognizing it. Well, we're going to have to go back. So he addressed free agency. The two kind of big signings in free agency are both, for the most part, very team friendly deals in Willie Gay and Chase Young. And if they hit their ceiling, the Saints basically committed highway robbery on both those players. And if they hit their ceiling, we're going to want to keep them around. And that's because they're both basically 1-year deals, new deals, extensions, whatever. But if they do that correctly and don't suddenly return to the old form of overvaluing the player or paying too much or giving too many years or whatever, and falling back into the old trap, then it's all for nothing. The other thing is, on that second question, talked about the draft, and then talked about still being in free agency and all our opportunities, if they are truly serious about resetting this, using to draft to bring those rookie players in on rookie deals, but draft better. So you're getting value on the field. I mean, I hate to bang on players because I know it's not all their faults. In some cases, it's not even their fault. It started with the team thought and evaluated and decided to pay. And I mean, as a player, you're like, well, yeah, I'm signing that deal. But Isaiah Foskey is a second round pick. You have Peyton Turner, former first round pick, still floating around that defensive line. Now, Peyton Turner's injury history has been abysmal. Foskey last year, with that second round pick and on the edge, we were expecting to see a lot of him at least, even if he wasn't a starter, even if he wasn't an every down guy. Like, well, second round pick, they were real high on him. They sold us on all this ability, all that he could do. But we never saw him on the field. And I don't know if there was any real clear explanation of why not. I want to say he was somewhere played about 108 defensive snaps on the season as a second round pick, that you were putting a lot of eggs in his basket. And I don't know the reason why. So I'm trying to do this as neutral as possible, that there's no blame necessarily to go around to the player, to the organization, but more blame about the player and the organization and the whole situation. Because when you do this, you have to get him on the field, and he's got to be able to produce. And the more those rookies you bring in on those rookie deals, the more you can get your salary cap back under control. And that's the whole idea Mickey's talking about here. I'm seriously hoping that they have bought into this, because they need to. They need to do as we've seen in a couple recent years, the Tampa Bay reset. Detroit has had a bit of a reset and a resurgence. Different circumstances for both. They went about it different ways, but the same principle exists on both teams of, we've got to fix these problems in our salary cap situation. Because in Tampa Bay's instance, they did go all in and they did win their Super Bowl. But realizing at some point, we got to reset it. Detroit, bringing in a new young coaching staff. Does this sound familiar? All throughout the whole organization, because they basically fired everybody, then hired Dan Campbell and a Ben Johnson to run the offense and to start drafting. I believe Aaron Glenn is still the defensive coordinator there, but drafting both sides of the ball, quality players in the first and second round, who, for instance, last year in that playoff run, those early draft picks, some of them were crucial to it. Some of them played very well in limited roles. And to bring that back to a Saints example, our first round pick last year, Brian Brzee. Overall, very positive rookie season. Kind of had to get in the rotation. He's got a long way to go in his run defense. I think everybody, including him, probably acknowledges that, and gets better against the run and more consistent against the pass. He's such an athletic big man in the middle that can really. I I was at the Giants game last year where he just went off, had his 2-sack game. But even outside of those two plays, you're looking at that big man running around that field. He makes you notice him when he's kind of got everything going. If we'd have gotten just part of that out of Foskey, already the pass rush is better, the rotation is better. And so the Saints have to do a better job of drafting these guys and a better job of getting them ready to be on the field, because you're really relying on them to fix a lot of the problems that Mickey Loomis is talking about. And there's one more real quick question that occurred a little later on that I want to bring up as the last part of this. It's about a minute long, so won't play as long as the first one did, but just pay attention to what Mickey's talking about here.
And how important was it to get contract renegotiations done with guys like DeMario?
Yeah, but they're important because A, of our cap situation, and B, because we're trying to manage all this together. It allows us to, keep our group together, allows us to manage our way out of the cap situation and remain competitive. And so all of it's connected.
With the way you guys went about that, or when you talk about like cleaning the cap, like Tyron's deal, for instance, adding on that extra year but kind of lowering the salary, is that kind of maybe
It's all part of it. All these things are they're not independent of each other. They're all connected. It's a big puzzle, and that's what makes it complicated. Any one of these individual deals are not complicated, but piecing it all together and having it planned out for a period of time, 2 and 3 years out. That's what gets complicated.
And I don't know if you kind of caught that the names Demario Davis and Tyrann Mathieu were brought up. And I think they're important, and I'm going to have to add a third name in here, in Cam Jordan, in this part of the conversation, as much as I really don't want to. And what Mickey was basically talking about there is the complications of the cap, of it being a puzzle. So you have this guy so many years, so much money, and then this guy, and it's not all 53 players all on 5-year deals where it's cut and dry. It's the way it interweaves and who's getting paid this much this year, and the way we structure the contract. He's actually going to make minimum next year, but somebody else is going to make more money. And then with the signing bonuses and prorating and yada, yada, and dead money, and the way we add void years to that's where the complications just get so far out of control. Even the very basic understanding I have of it, there was no way I would try to sit here and explain it. It's a black hole that you almost have to just go, we got to trust them on this. But those 3 names come up, or 2 names are brought up specifically, and I'm going to add Cam Jordan for some very just weird reasons, that they're all older players, all coming into 2024. They had extensive deals in one way, shape, or form, not to break each one down individually, but you had, I hate to use the term aging players, but they're veterans who are getting older, and there's always some type of ramification with that as far as what's going on the field. And they're all kind of based off just last year. in 3 stages of their career. DeMario, and they're all roughly the same age. I'm just gonna kind of group them together in that mid-30s, 10-year plus kind of. Even though I know their age and years in the league do differ some slightly. DeMario is still. I call him the Tom Brady of middle linebackers. It's just year after year, you're expecting the huge drop off of his elite production. And it's probably there if you really want to drill down and look for it. But just from the fan bases of sitting in the stands and watching the games, we don't really notice. You may look at his numbers and go, oh, they're not quite as good as they were. And he has some games where he has to take some snaps off, and not really any ever major injury issues that I can ever remember of with him. But they may be creeping in a little here and there. But overall, you're not really noticing and trying to nitpick any of that on him. Tyrann Mathieu is, and I am guilty of this, I am one of the Saints fans that at times can be very hard on the Honey Badger. And it's not so much his play on the field per se. It's because I get stuck to remember what Honey Badger was when he was at a very high elite level, especially towards the end in Arizona and then his time in Kansas City, definitely, and being part of one of their Super Bowl runs. The age and veteran portion of this whole equation with him, it's caught up to him slightly, and my frustration comes in, and it's a little worse when I'm at games and watching on TV, because when you can see the whole field live and you see plays developing and you're looking at Honey Badger, and there's no doubt he recognizes what's going on just as well as he ever did, if not even more with all experience he has, and is going to make a play even 3, 4, 5 years ago. The pick's in his back pocket, or he's lighting up a guy trying to catch a ball, or he's coming in on a run fill and got a TFL, a tackle for a loss on the play, stripping the ball, recovering the ball when it hits the ground. All those things we're used to seeing, and it's not like he's getting beat so badly he's not even in the picture. He's just maybe that quarter step slow. That's the difference between the guy that makes the monster big plays all the time, which is, I mean, for the most part, what he used to be, to making it some of the time, because you can go look back in his last 2 seasons with the Saints and go, yeah, there was a couple times where Honey Badger really saved saved us. And it's not his fault, and probably shouldn't be so hard on him, because he does bring a lot to this team still. And even though he's maybe not one of the elite safeties in the league anymore, he's still a pretty good one. And if you look around the league, and this is the thing that I have to remind myself, oh man, there's some teams out there that were just so desperate for safety help. They pulled let's call it a Saints front office, and overpaid the living bejesus out of a safety to roll out there and not make plays at all, and to look lost most of the game. And I promise you, if you look around the NFL, they're not that hard to find, So then we get to Cam. And up until last year, Cam's rather large contract, you kind of like, that might be a little too much, but Cam always brings so much. And even though when you look at his overall numbers and start comparing him, oh man, his sacks to these guys, or his run stops to these guys, or whatever category you want to pick. Yeah, there's always guys in the league who potentially in one of the categories you're looking at is going to have more than Cam. He's one of the few guys playing on the edge, though. When you look at the full list, he's all over the place. And that's the way the Saints have wanted their defensive ends to play. If you're good enough in the run game and good enough in the pass game and a good leader on the field and can step up and make some plays when your team needs you to, that's more they're looking for than the 16, 17 seed Junior Gillette back in the day players that a lot of NFL teams do just the opposite, is they take these guys on the edge and go, your job is to, if it's a pass, is to get in the backfield and harass, sack, destroy quarterbacks. And if it's an inside run, yeah, try to get to the mesh point. Or if it's a run away from you, try to go run him down. And if it's a run towards you, do your best to what you can, the slow or whatever, because a lot of these defenses that use edge rushers like that, and the run fills and all are coming from the secondary or a scraping linebacker coming down the edge, because they're willing to give up that play and hope. I wouldn't say hope, but try to design where somebody from the linebacking core or the from the secondary is going to come up and fill that spot. Saints rarely, I won't say never, play a defensive scheme along those lines, but you see it with them, as far as I can tell, a lot less than a lot of other NFL teams. You can't get always caught up in the numbers until last year. And he came nowhere near, and I know he had the ankle injury, and he is a veteran player. He's played a lot of snaps and games. I mean, he went for years without, he was always on the field. And there is something to say about the best ability to have is availability and be able to just keep grinding that away in a very professional manner that Cam did. And I mention it all this way because I don't want to make it sound like I'm banging on Cam and in any disrespectful way. But we have to be honest with what we saw, at least for 1 year. The thing is, with all three of these guys, and I was just thinking about this the other day, they're kind of the face of the franchise since Drew retired. Nobody else has really stepped up. Some people will probably say, well, Derek Carr is the quarterback. Put a pin in that. I'm going to get back to it in just a second. But those three are kind of what we saw last year from what we visibly saw in the locker room as fans. I'm not implying anything going on that we couldn't see with our own eyes in the interviews, and occasionally some stuff going on the sideline that the camera caught. For the most part, those three guys were the face of the franchise. They were the leaders. And until somebody else does it, they still are. They're all talked about highly, as far as I can tell, about what goes on in the locker room, highly with working with younger players, being the veteran leaders to do that part. In fact, one of the things I saw in one of the games, and I can't remember which one this year, that Cam really wasn't playing because the ankle injury, and Zach Bond is on the sidelines while the offense is on the field, and Cam's in his ear talking to him, and just that little brief clip, it was like Zach Bond was very accepting on whatever Cam was telling him. And I know Zach Bond, I don't want to say he had a monster game or anything, but I know that was one of the games that I saw where he played a lot better. So all that being said, what Cam did provide last year still not enough to justify that contract. And to go back to the clip that they talked about, or Mickey was talking about from the question, talking about the fact that DeMario and Honey Badger both reworked. I'm just going to use rework because I honestly actually don't know the full details of either one. But I know they were key parts of the Saints being able to get cap compliant in 2024. Throw in Ramchek's rework contract helped out, and not much really moving on the front with Cam. And that's one contract I have kind of looked at, and I think even if there was some type of rework both sides wanted to do, I think it's just at the point that it's just an unwieldy kind of mess. It's kind of like the last really quote unquote bad contract on the books for a player. And I don't know if either side can really do that much about it. So we basically have to hope it was all the ankle, that the ankle's fine. And even though you probably still, Cam's probably not at the point, especially as a defensive edge player, where you're going to get those massive snaps. But if he's a guy that can come in situationally, return to the cam, your snaps will be down, your plays will be down. But when you are on the field, if we can find that dog that Cam has been every year, kind of before last year, and I even hate using that term because the effort for whatever he could put forward was still there. It wasn't like he was coasting out there. So, but in the greater scheme of things, and this all ties back in, if the Saints are really buying into and believing what they're selling, what Mickey was selling last, I think it was Monday or Tuesday when this little interview happened. And I really encourage everybody, find a clip I've been watching. I think it's 8 or 9 minutes. Watch the whole thing because some other stuff he talked about in there that I may get to in later episodes. But I hope he's buying in. I mean, that's the gist of this whole exercise of looking at those two little brief clips of the fact I have never heard Mickey Loomis acknowledge anything like that in his existence as a Saints GM and feeling like it was honest. But now we have to see it, and we have to see the fruits of that labor, over which in the first part looks like at least a 2-year plan. And he did kind of hedge his bets there, going, well, a lot of variables, depends on my players in, and we'll reevaluate, which you can take either way. It's like nothing's working, so we've got to add another year to the reset instead of the looks like 2 that he's kind of admitting to. On the flip side, the Saints fly out next year, win 14 games, make a run in the playoffs, come up just short, and they convince themselves, oh, we're all in again. Look how close we came. I don't know the likelihood of that happening right now. I'm thinking not that great. But even if that situation were to come out, was it one of those years where everything just came together that you see some NFL teams doing, and then it's just back to the 8 and 9s, 9 and 8s that we've seen? You don't want to go in all in there. You have to be sure. So whatever their ultimate plan is, I mean, that was just a peek, I think, into kind of what they're thinking. Just follow through. And I think his comment was, we have to get back to what we did well. And I could not agree more, Mickey. And that's it for today. But before we go, you got to go back and pull the pin out of the Derek Carr comment from the previous segment, which is basically, I need Derek Carr to step up and become the face of the franchise. And it's not that he isn't out there. Um, I just need him to be a little less. Don't blame me for any of this, because he has quite a bit of that. And I also need him not to do stuff like go on a podcast and say, when asked a question about a now former teammate, started off with, well, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, and then spend the next 15 minutes throwing him under the bus, driving across him, reversing, and back and forth till there's nothing left. Cam, Demario, Honey Badger, please give lessons to our quarterback on how to kind of present yourself in a way that it's not going to agitate the fan base on a regular basis. And doing so would probably help him in the long run because, um, well, the, you're more apt to get free passes that way. Just saying. So let me hear what you think. You can drop comments below. YouTube, please like, share, subscribe, hit the notification. Rumble, do the same, except don't subscribe. Please hit the follow button. And, well, till next time, peace out. Hoot out.